So glad to be here. Have you ever had one of those mornings that you wake up and everything possibly goes wrong? I had that this last Sunday morning. I got up and I felt pretty good, and so I thought, well, I'll cook myself some breakfast. However, all I had left was some bacon, and I had already gotten dressed, and I know I'm not supposed to cook bacon if I've been dressed, but I thought I should go ahead and do it. So I was cooking some bacon, and everything was going pretty well, and then my phone rings, and I know not to text and drive. I know not to text and walk. I did not know that I was not supposed to text and cook. And so I'm there and I'm trying to text and I'm trying to flip bacon, and I spill the bacon on my very nice shirt that I had actually ironed. I did not just spray something to make it wrinkleless. Anyway, and so I have bacon on my shirt, and I'm upset about this, and I have a gas oven, and so and the what do you call the section that has the gas? I call it the hob plate. Anyway, it's got a lot of flame. And if there's no pot on it or pan, the flames are a good 6 inches off. I know it's not safe, Chief, but we'll get it fixed. Congratulations. And so I had this, and all of a sudden, my tie catches on fire. How do you get a burning tie off of your neck? I was not sure. Because I can't grab it, and it's a grease fire, so I can't throw water on it, because I learned that. And so I had this. Eventually, I had to cut off the tie, and it was a mess. And the worst part is, I was late because I was preaching about 40 minutes away, so I had to go, and I had this oil stains on me, and it was not good. And so I get up to preach, and I have oil stains on my trousers, on my shirt, and I have to defend myself on why I look like this. And that's the thing about when you have to defend how you look. It's pretty easy because there's always a story behind it. But if someone were to attack your character, it's a lot harder. We find in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul having to defend himself against people accusing him of a lot of things. And he addresses it, and he deals with what the problem is. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, we're going to be in verses 4 and 5. He deals with a lot of there, but there's two things he deals with. Every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God. And you know what, we're just going to go ahead and read it. So if you have your Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5. We'll start in verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For our weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and put it to objection and obedience of Christ. So here we have two things, and there are two things that I run into, I won't say daily anymore, but pretty much on a weekly basis, and that's arguments and lofty opinions raised against the knowledge of God. I don't know how many of you guys get into arguments a lot. I do, not as much as I used to, but I still find myself getting into arguments about a lot of things. But it's very simple because Paul tells me that there is something that's so powerful it destroys the stronghold of arguments. And more than that, in my life, is lofty opinions raised against the knowledge of God. If you don't know what a lofty opinion is, I had one of my cooking skills, and not so much anymore. And it's pride. Pride is when an opinion, a lofty opinion is, and you raise it against the knowledge of God. I don't know how prideful you have to be to have an opinion that rivals that of God, but that's a pretty high opinion of something. And so these are strongholds that get rooted in our lives very easily. It's very easy to get them, and sometimes it's really hard to get rid of. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to humble yourself, but that's pretty hard. But Paul says we have divine weapons that are so powerful they're on the heavenly scale. Now, living in Texas, I've seen some powerful weapons. I've seen a Colt Peacemaker up close. It's a revolver, and it can shoot just about through a lot of things. I've seen it go through a phone book, which doesn't sound impressive, but my BB gun couldn't do that. So, but Paul here tells us very simply, the way that we are to destroy these arguments are with divine power, a divine weapon. Hebrews 4 tells us that our divine weapon can split between the soul and the spirit, between bone and marrow. In Ephesians, we learn that the sword of the Spirit is our weapon that we use. And with that combination of using just the Bible as a weapon, we could destroy strongholds of pride and argument. But that's not all. He gives us one more step. He doesn't just simply say, use the Bible. And if I did that, that wouldn't be very good, would it? If I just gave you a lesson that said, well, read your Bible and we'll get there eventually. And we would. But Paul takes it one more step, and that's the application for this lesson, is to grab every thought and to put it into subjection of Christ. And that's verse 5. We destroy every lofty argument and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take thought we take thought captive to the obedience of Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience and when obedience is complete. Now, I don't know about you, but I can be quite thoughtless. And to take every thought captive is a lot. My application and my charge to you guys this week is to look at your lives in every aspect possible and make sure they have Christ involved. To look at our lives and make sure that we don't have, on a pie chart, 55% Christianity, and then 5% school, 10% driving, but instead to have Christ be through the whole of our lives. And that way we can make sure that we're putting our lives to the obedience of Christ. If you have any needs or you need the prayers of the church, I invite you now as together we stand and sing.